My name is Kiara. I'm project coordinator at Nordic Pioneers. And we started this video podcast series in order to inspire our young audience to take action by highlighting personal stories from other social entrepreneurs and activists or people just out there doing inspiring things. And we're starting off the series with interviewing our jury. And today we have you, Mollie Saltskog. I hope I pronounced that right.
Yeah,
Would you like to introduce yourself? Tell us your name, age, where you're from.
sure. Um, my name is Mollie Saltskog, and I'm about 29 years old, from Sweden originally. Right now, I am working as a senior intelligence analyst at the SUFON Group, where I've been for almost the last 5 years, and I'm also a research fellow with the SUFON Center. It's such a pleasure to be here with you today.
Thank you. And so what does the Sufan Center do? What do you do in your work specifically?
Yeah, at the Suvon Center, which is a non-for-profit think tank organizations, I contribute to research projects related to the disinformation extremism nexus, geopolitics, and international security. For example, most recently, I authored an issue brief published by the Sufon Center that looked at trends in the violent far-right landscape and whether or how sanctions prove as a useful tool in countering or constraining these trends within the movement. And this issue brief was part of a broader TSC research project supported by the Aaron Eve Trust to deepen our understanding about the impact of sanctions and prescriptions on terrorist groups with a focus on violent far right actors, and how those could be impacted by sanctions.
Okay. Sounds super interesting. How did you discover that passion?
Well, I think when it comes to terrorism and violent extremism, growing up with events such as 9/11, the Bali bombings, the Madrid attacks, the 7/7 bombings in London, the Utøya attack in Norway, the rise of ISIS in Iraq and Syria. I mean, I think it would be naive to think that that did not have a massive impact on my choice of studies and a career. Um, you know, After having worked with this for a while, doing research, analysis, um, policy suggestion, I also have a greater appreciation for how terrorism and extremism does not necessarily operate in a vacuum. For example, understanding how geopolitics, conflict, disinformation, lack of human security, and human rights abuses, and so forth, all impact, the violent extremism landscape across different ideologies and across the world.
Hmm. And so what did you study and how did it all begin?
So I studied at high school in Sweden, and I
Mhm.
specifically chose a high school that had most of its curriculum in English because I knew I wanted to perhaps move overseas from Sweden when I graduated. I studied languages during my gap year living in China, and then I went to college in Singapore where I decided to study international relations. And
Mhm.
same thing with my master's degree in China, I studied global affairs. So understanding how the world works, basically, the
Mhm.
theories, the practice, diplomacy, things like that.
Okay. It seems like you had like a very well, you knew what you wanted to do and you were sort of headed straight towards it.
Yes and no. I think
Hmm.
one of the most important things that I learned throughout my journey was
Hmm.
that life is never a perfect plan. It's never linear. It's never how you think it may look. Um, for example, I was pretty set on going to school in the United States. I wanted to go to college in the US after high school. Um, my SAT scores weren't perfect when I was in high school, so I decided, or not perfect, they weren't good enough, basically. Um, Having a perfect score would have been wonderful. Um, so I decided to take a year, live in a new culture, broaden my horizons, learn a new language, and study a bit more for my SAT scores. And when I was living and studying in China, I came to understand how, important and vibrant and um, what a big role, East Asia and the broader Indo-Pacific plays. And when there was an opportunity for me to go to college in Singapore, I took that opportunity because I knew I wanted to spend more time in Asia.
Hmm.
So that's
Yeah,
just
that
one
makes.
way of how the world works in mysterious ways, and where your original plan was actually panned out, not did not pan out, and um, the path that I decided to take instead has led to so many opportunities that I probably wouldn't have had, or I would have had different opportunities if I'd gone straight to the United States for school.
Yeah, and I guess a more like diverse approach to things and a broader global understanding. Um, yeah. What else do you think that what else do you feel this like multicultural background and this like experience with so many countries has given you?
I think anytime there is a situation outside of your quote comfort zone, or
Uh,
you're experiencing something different, or you're overcoming challenges by yourself. And that doesn't have to be overseas. I mean, that can
hmm.
happen in right at home, or you're moved to a different city in your country, or to a different neighborhood where not all your friends are. Um, that can seem hard and difficult and sometimes anxiety inducing, and sometimes, I mean, many times over you're like, this was a mistake. I should have just stuck to the safe path. I should have done what all my friends did. But in the end, you know, trust the process, trust that you're growing as a person, trust that you're making new friends, that you're getting new opportunities that you didn't even know existed. And, before you know it, you're going to look back on that experience and say, wow, that was really formative years for me that put me on the path that I am today. And I would not trade that experience, despite all its hardship, despite all its difficulties and loneliness and doubt, that actually that made you what you are today.
Hmm. Yeah. And so and now how did you end up in the US?
Well, it's quite simple. Once I decided that I wanted to work, with matters related to international security, geopolitics, countering violent extremism, I decided I wanted to work with and learn from the best, which is my boss, Ali Soufan.
Hmm. And what inspired you about Ali Soufan?
Well, Ali is a leading national security and counterterrorism expert. When he was in the FBI, he investigated and supervised the most complex international terrorism cases, the East Africa embassy bombings, the attack on the USS Cole, and the events surrounding 9/11. And after he left the government and the FBI and founded the Soufan Center, he's continued his lifelong devotion to working on issues related to international security, championing the rule of law and human rights. And I've learned so much from him. And most fundamentally, that, where there is no rule of law and where there is, a breach of human rights and violation of human rights, there cannot not be security. And so those go
Hmm.
hand in hand. And that's really something that Ali has taught me.
Okay. He sounds like a yeah, very inspirational figure. Um, but as you were, you started pretty young to move out into the world and start your professional career. Did you ever feel like you encountered opposition because of your either your gender or because of your age?
This is a really important question. And, I realize how incredibly lucky I have been in never having experienced that in my day-to-day work. And for
Hmm.
that, the credit is to my bosses and my mentors. I think what it comes down to is the culture that's fostered by the leadership of an organization. And Ali and the leadership at the Soufan Center, like our executive director, Noreen Fink, they've really created a working environment where you thrive and excel and grow. And we are
Hmm.
much more like a family rather than colleagues. And there's zero tolerance or room for anything even
Hmm.
resembling hate, sexism, intolerance, and so forth. But what I
Hmm.
will say is, you know, the most potent example of where I've experienced it is, related to my work, but outside of my day-to-day job is sadly something that I think a lot of women minorities probably will also identify as, and that's, part of my professional role is also to do public engagements, like being interviewed as an expert by the media or writing op-eds, analysis, or commentary.
Hmm.
Um, and when you do that, I always expect some level of public criticism. Frankly, I welcome any disagreements with my ideas or my analysis. That's how, one inevitably grows and broadens,
Absolutely.
your perspective and hone in on your argument. But a lot of the quote disagreements that you get or that I've received when doing public engagement and media are in the form of online hate and harassment, and especially sexism. And I
Hmm.
think that's by the virtue of being a young woman. And what's interesting is that I tend to get a lot more sexist hate and harassment when I do media in Sweden rather than in the United States.
Oh, that is interesting. And is it in the like comments of these interviews that you do, or do you experience it from people interviewing you themselves?
No, no, not
Okay.
the media,
Okay.
the interviewers, not the journalists. Absolutely no. It's online hate and
Okay.
harassment, primarily on social media, and it could
Yeah.
be public, but it could also be, direct messages.
Yeah. Well, that's horrible. That's uncomfortable to experience and to hear. But I mean, what advice would you give in terms of this like confidence and the dealing with opposition? What advice do you have for young women who want to make change but will probably unfortunately meet that along the way?
Listen, I mean, this is the bottom line is, and so many more people experience this on a much more frequent and larger scale than I ever have. But the
Mhm.
bottom line is that hate really hurts, and it doesn't matter if it's just in words and not physical violence. But hate really hurts. If it's on a social media platform, you should report it. Um, if it's threats of physical violence or harm, you should must report it to the police immediately. And then to pick myself up and cheer myself up, I say to myself, if I'm pissing someone off, I'm probably doing something right. I'm
Mhm.
probably stepping on some toes or breaking some glass ceilings if people are
Yeah.
that angry.
Yeah.
But that doesn't, remove the fact that it still really hurts. So I think talking to someone, talking with colleagues, talking with friends, talking with mentors, and finding a way to cope, having a self-care routine is very important. I sometimes, you know, want to shut my brain off and not think about it, and then I watch Star Wars or The Lord of the Rings because it's a world away from, you know, hate and intolerance, and because it's, made up world.
Mhm.
Um, so finding what works for you, but I think the most important thing is, report it, um, and report it to the appropriate, if it's the platform or the authorities, and don't accept it. I personally decide not to engage because I don't think that anything will be solved by engaging with people who are so hateful and so sexist.
Mhm.
But that's my personal choice.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense, and it seems like a good approach. Um, so yeah, going back to um, your life before working. I was yeah, I went on your LinkedIn for my research for this interview and saw that you took part as well in high school in a lot of like extracurricular activities. For example, Model United Nations and the European Youth Parliament. Could you tell us a bit about well, first of all, what those activities are and your experience at doing those types of things?
Absolutely. Model United Nations and the European Youth Parliament are fantastic youth organizations that put on conferences and similar activities where youths can learn. about diplomacy and how policy is made in institutions like the United Nations and the EU. It really fosters, these people-to-people relations across different cultures, enhances your understanding of how important these type of multinational institutions are for uh, safeguarding peace and prosperity and human rights. And it gives young people the practical experience of how it is to debate and to draft policy at that level, which I think is a fantastic opportunity.
Absolutely. And what drove you to take part in these activities?
Um, I was curious to understand, how the world works and how policy is made at that level. And these organizations gave me the opportunity to understand the complexity, diplomacy, protocols of these large multinational forums that, for me as a youth, were quite foreign and vague. I think reading about them in the classroom, I wanted to experience it in person.
Hmm. And in what ways would you, because obviously not everyone has access to these types of programs, but how would you say there are other ways that young people could develop these skills, um, and sort of learn about these interests at a young age?
Honestly, the most important skill that I learned doing these programs was, um, no matter your difference of opinion, you keep engaging.
Hmm.
Diplomacy, right? When you
Yeah.
stop talking, that's when things get really bad. And diplomacy is always a skill of being able to talk to both friends and people who are a different culturally or have a different opinion from you. But diplomacy is the most important skill when you're having dealings with those that are you have fundamental disagreements with,
Hmm.
and never stop engaging.
Yeah.
The other skill that I think anyone can practice with a pen and paper is write, write, write. It took me a really long time to find confidence in my writing, expressing my opinion, my thinking of on policy or solutions, and especially if you're doing it in a language that's not your mother tongue. But all I can say is that practice makes perfect, and that's why it was so inspiring and so wonderful to see that Lukman was awarded the Nordic Pioneer Prize last year for founding the debate site Jone.no. And that's, an opportunity for young people to share their opinion, their analysis, and engage in debating policy. And that's such an important forum.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And it's great to hear that that these young people are leaving a mark, and yeah, just super inspiring projects that they're all leading. Um, but have you found that sorry, wait, I lost my space here. Um, in terms of diplomacy and things like that, have you found that um, because Nordic Pioneers is sort of developed from the idea that Nordic communities can benefit a lot from sharing ideas and solutions with each other because we have a lot of the same social problems and can maybe help each other with finding these solutions. Have you found that sort of the exchange of ideas between yourself and people from different cultures or at your international school has benefited you in your work?
Yes, the short answer is yes. I
Yeah.
mean, you can never lose
Mm,
by talking to someone that may have a different idea or opinion, because the worst thing that can happen is that you are so close-minded that you don't benefit from those ideas and solutions, and that is your loss. And the best that can happen is that you together find a wonderful, new idea, or that you yourself grow as a person, both professionally and personally. Um, Again, engaging is never wrong. Um,
mm,
I say more engagement with our youth in the Nordic countries. I think the Nordic Pioneer Prize shows that policymakers and community leaders need to stop seeing youths as the problem or the vulnerable population and start seeing them as the solution. The Nordic Pioneer Prize shows that um, our Nordic youths are extremely entrepreneurial. They want to do good and give back to their communities, and they are go-getters and action-oriented. They actually do it. They see a solution and they go after it and they make that solution into reality.
Yeah, and going back to the part that you were talking about with, I mean, with talking to these closed-minded people, what advice would you give to these young people that are, attempting to engage with and trying to communicate with someone who just won't listen?
Never give up, you know.
Hmm.
There are, this is the reality of the world, and when you have when you believe in something very strongly, when you have a idea that you want to make reality, if someone isn't listening to you, if they don't want to understand, that's their loss. Then find someone who believes in you. Surround yourself with people who lift you up, not people who bring you down. Whether that's a mentor, that's a friend, that's um, a family member. It took me a quite a long time um, to realize that people who bring negative energy or want to put you down are not the people that you should surround yourself. It's not worth the price of whatever
Hmm.
the thing is that you think you're achieving. The best thing that you can do yourself that you can do for yourself is to surround yourself professionally and personally with people who believe in you and want to see you succeed. And I have had some amazing mentors since high school, and I still have them. Pia Karlberg, who was my mentor since high school, Ali, my boss, and then Magnus Ranstorp, who is a terrorism expert in Sweden, just to name a few. I wouldn't be where I am today without their guidance. And when you get to my age and beyond, then you give back, then you can mentor. And
Hmm.
that's one way that I give back, that by mentoring young professionals and students who are interested in bringing change in the world of countering violent extremism or international security.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, mentors, yeah, very valuable, very important.
And
Um,
that's part of the Nordic Pioneer community as well, is the network and um, learning from each other and exchanging ideas. And we in the jury, I mean, I think I speak for all of us when I say, if you're a youth who has a wonderful, brilliant idea and you want to talk about it because you're meeting opposition in your local community or by in stuffy policy making halls,
mhm.
come talk to us. Like, let's figure it out.
Yeah. And what would you say, I mean, as a society, what is it that's why is it that we don't already have these young people at the same table as the grown-ups at the and the leaders and the decision makers? What do you think it takes to make that change?
I think it's both a change in mindset and a structural change perhaps are needed. But I think the biggest one is policymakers, leaders, politicians, they need to stop seeing youths as the problem and see them be part of the solution instead. And
Hmm.
I think Nordic Pioneer Prize really showcases how youths can be part of the solution and why youth should be invited into these incredibly important conversations that, frankly, is about their future.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, oftentimes. Um, and yeah, why, I mean, you've already sort of answered why you think it's important to support youth engagement, but what do you hope that you personally could do as part of the jury?
Well, fundamentally, it's about lifting the work that youths do in the Nordic countries to for their communities, um, both giving them the platform where leaders, policymakers, community leaders can see what amazing um, solutions there are out there, and activities that these youths have put on with very little support, frankly.
Mhm.
But also, for the young people in our society to be recognized for the hard work that they do.
Mhm.
Um, that someone says, "Hey, we see you and we think that you are awesome.
Yeah.
We think that you are, a pioneer and an
Mhm.
inspiration." And I think that's really important that and that it goes back to the conversation about mentors and who you surround yourself with. You need people to support you. You need people to say, "Hey, keep going. What you're doing is great. What you're doing
Mhm.
is right. And here's how I can help. And here's what you can do," and so on. And so that's what Nordic Pioneers is all about, in my opinion, is, you know, giving someone recognition for the really important hard work that they do,
Yeah.
and giving them a community, you know, where everyone is supportive and everyone wants everyone to succeed, and giving people the opportunity to exchange ideas. Um, it's so critical. I wish there was other platforms like this for our Nordic youths.
Yeah. And it's very interesting to I'm excited to see where it goes in the future because a lot of the winners and the top tens and everyone really who's been nominated has already gotten so far with I mean they have a support system, but it'll be very exciting to see where it goes in the future with this bigger network now of mentors and of support. And yeah, I just think it's very uplifting to see and very excited and a very exciting thing to be a part of.
Oh, I mean, when we do our jury work, and I'm going to speak for the jury again, even though they're
Mhm.
not here to speak for themselves. We were all just, we keep saying how blown away we are with, the grit, the entrepreneurial spirit, the sense of giving back, the solution oriented. It's very much, uh, to go back to my favorite fictional character, Yoda in Star Wars, it's very much the mentality, do or do not, there is no try.
Yeah.
And it's just, it inspires me, to do better, to be better, to
Hmm.
give it my all in my line of work, and to engage, with youths and mentor, and things like that. It's really
Hmm.
truly inspirational to see what these young people have managed to accomplish with, like I said, oftentimes very little resources, obviously important support from their communities, families, friends, mentors, but can you imagine what they will do with more support and more resources? It's just wonderful.
Exactly. Yeah. So that explains the Yoda cover photo on your LinkedIn.
Yes.
I was gonna ask about that in the start, but then I was like, no, I don't know.
I
It
try
came
to
up.
live by that motto too, by Yoda's wise
Yeah,
words,
he was your
in
role
The
model, I guess.
Empire Strikes Back. I think it's that one. Do or
Yeah,
do not, there is no try. If you're gonna do it 100%.
yeah, very wise words from the man himself.
I don't know if Yoda has a gender. I'll
Oh,
let him
true. Yeah, I
decide.
haven't watched Star Wars, so I couldn't tell you.
Or
He's a
not
free
him.
spirit.
I'll let Yoda decide.
Yeah, yeah, of course. All right, well, this was actually, I mean, no, I have one last question actually. So you obviously, from the sounds of it, you had a lot of mentors throughout your journey and a lot of good support systems to reach out to and things like that. But what is one piece of advice or something that you wish you knew and understood when you were younger?
That your career trajectory, your personal, your professional life, it's never gonna be, standard, like straight line to whatever you thought it would be. It's not gonna, you can plan and plan and plan, but life happens, and that's okay. And when there is an opportunity that is presented that you did not think was possible, or that you didn't even think of and you're quite unsure of, uh, think about how that makes you grow as a person. Think about you know, how it can help you hone your skills or broaden your horizons or um, make you, a more consequential individual, and take it. No one um, will ever say or question why you decided to take an opportunity or a path that was less, you know, clear or walked on.
Mhm.
Um, it will make sense when you look back how that contributed to your personal narrative, your personal story, and it's probably, in my experience, it's probably going to end up being, what made you who you are today. So don't think that you need to fit into a perfect, you know,
Mhm.
path or box. It's the most consequential and interesting people that you'll meet and that I've met in my life has been the people who decided to take the less conventional path.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And is there anything you want to add in the end?
No, I think that's it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat then. And it was so interesting to hear what you had to say, and definitely was inspiring for me. And I know that anyone listening to this will find it inspiring as well. Um, so yeah, I mean, keep up the great work, and thanks again for joining today and for being a part of this project in general. Yeah,
Thanks, Kiara.
of
You can cut
course.
out the Yoda comment if you want. It's just me nerding
No,
out on that.
I will not cut it out.